What if one man, one forgotten warrior, left a mark so deep that it still lives inside millions of people today? Not a legend, not a myth, a real genetic trace, hidden blood, scattered across continents, and only now are we beginning to understand it. The winds of the Mongolian steppe never stop. They whisper across endless grasslands, carrying stories older than history itself, stories of tribes, of war, of survival, and somewhere in those winds, a secret was buried. For centuries, historians believed the ancient world was divided. Civilizations rose and fell separately: Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, ancient China, Persia, Eastern Europe, each one its own story, unconnected. Or so we thought, because recently, something didn't add up. A pattern began to emerge, quickly, almost unnoticed. Scientists studying human DNA started seeing something strange. A repeated signature, the same genetic marker, appearing again and again and again, across Asia, across Europe, across regions that had no reason to share anything. At first, it looked like coincidence, but the more they looked, clearer it became. This wasn't random. This was a trail, and every trail leads somewhere. It began with a simple question. How can one genetic pattern exist in so many different populations, so far apart, so disconnected, and yet so similar? The answer was unsettling, because the pattern didn't just appear everywhere. It pointed back to one place, the Mongolian steppe, and then to one time, roughly 800 years ago, but then something strange happened. When scientists mapped the spread of this DNA, didn't follow trade routes, it didn't follow migration patterns, it followed conquest, rapid, violent, expansive. Like something or someone had carried it across the world. To understand this, we have to go back, before empires, before global maps, to a land where survival was the only law. The Mongolian plains, cold, unforgiving, endless. Tribes lived here, constantly moving, constantly fighting. Loyalty was fragile. Power changed hands quickly. And in this world, a boy was born into chaos. He had no kingdom, no security, no future. His father was poisoned, his family abandoned, left to starve in the wilderness. He saw betrayal before he understood trust, violence before he knew peace. Most children would have broken. He didn't, because something inside him refused to disappear. He learned quickly, adapted faster. Every hardship became a lesson, every enemy a future opportunity. And slowly, he began to rise, not as a king, not yet, but as a survivor. Years passed, the boy became a man, and the man became something else, a leader. But not the kind history expected. He didn't just unite tribes, he reshaped them. He broke traditions, rebuilt loyalty, created a new order. One based not on bloodline, ran on strength, ran trust. People followed him, not because they had to, but because they believed. And that belief changed everything. This is where the story deepens, because his rise wasn't just political. It was unstoppable. His armies moved faster than anything the world had seen. They crossed deserts, mountains, rivers. Entire civilizations fell before they even understood what was happening. Cities that had stood for centuries collapsed in weeks. Empires crumbled. Borders vanished. And wherever his armies went, they left something behind, not just destruction. Something else, something invisible. Something that would outlast every building, every empire, every king. At first, no one noticed. How could they? There were no tools to see it, no science to measure it. Only time would reveal the truth. Centuries later, modern researchers began piecing it together. They analyzed DNA from thousands of individuals, from different regions, different cultures, different histories. And yet, there it was again. The same genetic signature, identical papillicillard, unmistakable, it appeared in Central Asia, in parts of China, in Eastern Europe, even reaching into the Middle East. A massive spread, too massive to ignore, and too precise to be random. Then came the breakthrough. Scientists realized something shocking. This genetic marker wasn't just common, it was unusually concentrated, as if it had spread rapidly in a very short period of time. That shouldn't happen, not naturally, not without a cause. And when they traced its origin, it led back to one lineage, one ancestral line, one man. What they discovered shocked everyone, because this wasn't just any lineage. It belonged to a figure history already knew, a figure surrounded by myth, power, and fear. A man whose empire once stretched across continents, a man whose influence reshaped the world. But no one expected this. No one expected his legacy to still be alive inside millions of people. But here's the part no one saw coming. The deeper they looked, more complex it became. Because the DNA didn't just spread randomly. It aligned with ancient civilizations, specific ones, civilizations that had direct contact with his empire, civilizations that had fallen or been absorbed, civilizations that history believed were separate, independent, unconnected. But now, they weren't. Because somehow, this one lineage linked them all. And then something even stranger appeared. Fragments of this DNA showed subtle variations like branches of a tree. Each one tied to a different region, a different civilization, but all leading back to the same root, the same origin, the same man. How is that possible? How could one individual connect so many ancient worlds? How could his genetic signature survive centuries, unchanged, unbroken? And more importantly, what does it mean? Because this isn't just about one warrior, this is about history itself. If one lineage can link civilizations, then maybe those civilizations were never truly separate. Maybe the world was connected, long before we believed it was. Maybe our understanding of history is incomplete. And this is where everything begins to shift. Because if the DNA is real, and the spread is real, then we have to ask a difficult question. Was this simply the result of conquest, or was there something more? Something intentional? Something planned? The records from that time are incomplete, many destroyed, many altered, many lost forever. But what remains tells a story of expansion, of control, of influence. Not just over land, but over people, over generations. And then, one final discovery changed everything. Researchers noticed something they hadn't expected. The genetic signature wasn't just widespread. It was dominant in certain regions. A significant portion of the population carried it. Not a small trace, not a rare occurrence, but a powerful presence, as if history had been quietly shaped by a single bloodline. And that raises a terrifying possibility. What if this wasn't accidental? What if this wasn't just the byproduct of war? What if this was something else entirely? Something deeper, something intentional. Because if one man's DNA could spread this far, this fast, this completely, then what else did he leave behind? What other connections are we missing? What other truths are still hidden? And just when it seemed like the mystery couldn't get any deeper, it did, because buried in the data was something no one could explain, a pattern within the pattern. A signal that didn't match the timeline, didn't match the known history, didn't match anything. And that's when researchers realized this story isn't just about the past. It's about something far bigger, something still unfolding. And in part 2, everything changes. Because the truth behind this DNA is far more complex, far more unsettling than anyone imagined. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It began with a pattern. a single genetic signature spreading across continents, linking people who had never met, connecting civilizations that history said were separate. And at the center of it all, one Mongolian warrior, one lineage, one origin. But that was only the beginning, because when researchers looked closer, they realized something unsettling. The DNA wasn't just widespread, it was structured, organized, almost as if it followed a design, and that shouldn't be possible, not for something driven by chance. At first, scientists assumed the explanation was simple: a powerful ruler, a vast empire, generations of descendants. It made sense. History had seen conquerors before, men who shaped nations, men who left legacies. But this was different, because no other lineage in recorded history had spread this far, this fast, this precisely. So they dug deeper, they expanded their research, collected more samples, mapped more regions. And that's when the real picture began to form. The genetic signature wasn't random. It followed the expansion routes of one of the largest empires ever built, across Central Asia, into China, through Persia, reaching Eastern Europe. Everywhere this empire went, DNA followed, like a shadow, like a fingerprint. But then something strange happened. The timeline didn't fully match. Some branches of the genetic line appeared earlier than expected. Others spread faster than human migration should allow. It was inconsistent, unpredictable, and that raised a new question. Were we looking at one man, or something bigger? Because the data suggested something unusual. The lineage wasn't just a single line. It had branches, multiple, expanding simultaneously. As if the source wasn't one individual on a network, a lineage that grew faster than history could record. This is where the story changes. Because now, we're not just talking about a warrior, we're talking about a system, a structure, a legacy that may have been carefully expanded. Historical records give us fragments, stories of conquest, of leaders who controlled vast territories, of rulers who rewarded loyalty. But they also tell us something else, something often overlooked. Power wasn't just about land. It was about blood, about lineage, about ensuring your legacy continued. And in this case, it did, on a scale no one had imagined. Modern genetic studies estimate that millions of men today share a similar Y chromosome lineage, a lineage traced back to a small region in Mongolia around 800 years ago. That's not coincidence, that's exponential expansion. But how? How does one lineage grow that large, that dominant, that widespread? There are only a few explanations: war, migration, influence, or something more deliberate. Because when empires expand, they don't just take land, they reshape populations, they integrate cultures, they alter the genetic landscape. And in this case, they may have done it more effectively than any empire before or after. But here's where things get even more unsettling, because the DNA didn't just connect regions. It connected civilizations, ancient ones, some long gone, some thought to be isolated. Fragments of the same lineage have been found in populations tied to Central Asian tribes, ancient Persian regions, parts of northern China, Eastern European groups, even communities with no direct historical records of interaction. At first glance, doesn't make sense. But then you remember something: history isn't complete. What we know is only a fraction of what happened. And DNA doesn't forget. This means one thing: these civilizations were more connected than we thought, not just through trade, not just through war, but through people, through blood, through generations. And at the center of it all was a lineage powerful enough to bridge them all. But then came the biggest discovery, the one that changed everything. Researchers noticed a repeating pattern. not just in location, but in hierarchy. In many regions where the DNA appeared, it was concentrated among historically dominant groups, leaders, warriors, elite families. That's not random. That suggests something else still alleged up there, a system that elevated certain bloodlines. And suddenly, theory shifted. What if this wasn't just about one warrior's descendants? What if it was about a ruling structure that prioritized a specific lineage? A lineage that spread not just through conquest, not through power systems, because if that's true, then this DNA didn't just survive history, it shaped it. Think about it. If one lineage dominated leadership positions across multiple regions over centuries, then its influence would extend far beyond genetics. It would affect politics, culture, decisions, wars, all guided by a shared ancestral thread. And that changes everything, because now we're not just looking at the past, we're looking at a hidden continuity, a thread that runs through history, connecting moments we thought were separate. But here's the most unsettling part. We don't know where it ends, because this lineage didn't disappear. It didn't fade. It's still here, still present, still carried by millions of people today, and most of them have no idea that their DNA connects them to an ancient empire, to a warrior who reshaped the world, to a lineage that bridged civilizations. No idea that history is still living inside them. So what does this mean? It means the past isn't gone. It's not buried. It's not lost. It's alive in ways we're only beginning to understand. And maybe this is just the beginning. Because if one lineage can connect 11 ancient civilizations, then what else is hidden in our DNA? What other stories are waiting to be discovered? What if the map of human history isn't written in books, in us? And if that's true, then the biggest discoveries are still ahead, waiting, silent, high, in plain sight.